No call alongs today. Welcome. We are, of course, streaming this on Twitch, ladies and gentlemen. So do me a favor, join there and say hi. We need the statistics. So it's twitch.com/Thomas_Ochman. That's me. Boys, today we will talk about JavaScript versus jQuery. JavaScript is the programming language for the web, and we're gonna demystify jQuery a little bit and touch upon that subject a bit. So without any further ado, we just want to get started. Thank you, Luke and David, for joining the stream. I'm waiting for the rest of you. Svampen, that's Kim. All right. Welcome to the stream, of course. Let's see if we can sort things out. What we will be talking about is pretty straightforward. I'm going to turn off the chat while I'm doing my presentation. I will be talking a little bit and I will be coding, and David asked me if there will be some code alongs, and the answer is in principle no, but I will be running a few examples, and if you want to, you can bring up your kitchen sink repositories if you have them, and you can code along a little bit with me. It's nothing extraordinary. We won't be doing any hardcore coding. I've set aside approximately 60 minutes for this thing right now, and if we go a little bit over that because we are in the middle of running some experiments, then we do that. But otherwise, this is pretty straightforward. What we'll be talking about is a little bit of JavaScript overview again, and then introduce you to the concept of what jQuery actually is and why we're talking about this. And we're gonna do a little bit of comparison of JavaScript versus jQuery, like what is it all about and so on. But also try to answer a question and perhaps have a discussion whether this is even relevant, and if it's worth for you as new developers or for anybody else that is new at coding or and building for the web, if it's even relevant for you guys to learn about all of this and so on. And I have a few takes on that, so bear with me. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer for everybody who's watching. I'm reusing a lot of materials that are freely available on the web. So as always, I use resources that I don't come up with anything, like super new or anything. I don't want to come across like a great, philosopher or anything like that. Everything I say is highly opinionated, but it's also it builds upon my own experience and the experience of my colleagues in the industry, but also a lot of other materials that are, as I said, freely available for you guys to look at and so on. So JavaScript, right? We all know it, we love it, or we hate it, or we use it nonetheless because it is the one of the three main components of everything that we experience on the web, on the internet, as we, the normal deadly people, kind of know about it, right? So what was often referred to as the World Wide Web or the web before, or and still is just one part of this distributed network, the internet, right? There are, of course, many other parts and many other protocols that are being run, but the majority of this planet's population, at least those who actually use the internet, and it's worth bearing in mind that not everyone does. There are still big chunks of the human populations that never use the internet for anything, but those who do, they use the World Wide Web. They browse, they entertain themselves, they communicate with each other, they do business, they do government things, whatever, right? Using the HTTP protocol, right? So, and for that, JavaScript is really important. It gives some interactivity to all the elements on the web. And did I miss something? I see that you guys are having fun. What's going on?
Christian's camera.
Oh, Christian, yes. Oh, the food. All right. So the stream can't see that, but yes, we got a very nice close up of Christian's sandwich. That's uh, that's that's uh, that's good. Bon appetit, Christian. Bon appetit. Um, and thank you for the follow, Sevader14. Now, JavaScript is the one of the three components. The other two are, of course, CSS and HTML. And you've heard me say this before. We refer to all of this as the Holy Trinity quite often. So with JavaScript, you can do a lot of things. You can add interactivity to your web application. You can also modify the DOM, or you can do network requests. You can fetch data and so on, right? So there's a lot of things that you can do with JavaScript, and that's why we kind of use it. And all modern type of applications are heavily reliant on JavaScript today. Now, jQuery, on the other hand, which is like a bit of a topic for today, is not a programming language per se. It could be perceived as a preprocessor of JavaScript, according to the creators of jQuery. Sorry, it is an elegant lower-level API to make working with the document object model easy across browsers. An elegant low-level API to make working with the document object model easy across browsers. That sounds a bit Greek to me, or to you perhaps. Why is this relevant? Well, they created this library in one way or another, or whatever you want to call it, to condense some of the common JavaScript tasks that everyone was doing or is doing into fewer lines of code. They basically wrapped some functionality of JavaScript and made it simpler for people to use. And you can perform most of the things that you can do in JavaScript in jQuery, using jQuery. So it adds a lot of functionality or separate functions and a simpler syntax and so on. It's fairly easy to install and use. You will see how easy it is in just a few minutes, and it's fairly simple to understand. And to touch upon the question that I asked in the beginning of this presentation, whether this is still relevant or not, you will find jQuery in many legacy projects or projects that are already built out there in the industry, right? Now, you as junior developers, you will there is a chance/risk, depends on how you look at it, that the first job you have will involve you working on an existing project that has been around for a few years, perhaps 5, 6, 7 years, that is web-based, a web-based application, probably in the front end. That's usually where a lot of juniors end up. And you might find jQuery there one way or another. But more on that in a few minutes. Now, if you take a look at the usage of jQuery, I grabbed this. I want to show you this diagram. I grabbed this from a website called buildwith.com, where you can look at all the technologies that are out there, all the frameworks and libraries and languages and so on, and check the usage of that. And this diagram tracks for instance, the usage of the top 1 million websites on the internet, and there are many millions websites, but the top 1 million amongst those websites, over 75% of them uses jQuery one way or another. Okay, so if you look at the top top 100,000, there's also a fairly big chunk, like 35–40% of them uses jQuery and so on. So that is, it's still a widespread technology, one would say. If we look at it from a slightly different perspective of Stack Overflow, which can be interesting for you guys to know about, since you are probably using Stack Overflow extensively. If you look at the green line here represents the amount, or the chunk of all the questions asked at Stack Overflow that relates to JavaScript. And you can see that from 2008, when I guess Stack Overflow started, or at least started to measure this, um, it has grown from around 5% to at its peak 12.5% of all questions asked on Stack Overflow. If you look at JavaScript alone, if you look at jQuery, it peaked around 2013, 2014, and has since declined a lot, right? And this could be an indicator, which is of course not the entire, it doesn't give you an entire picture, but it could be an indicator of how popular something is among developers, because Stack Overflow is basically used by everyone in the industry and also outside of industry, all the beginners and so on, that start to learn how to code. And in 2021 or 2020, you were down to less than 2% of all questions. So the popularity has declined a lot. And I can just tell you that for me personally, where I am at the moment in my development and what I work with, I never use jQuery anymore, right? You do not use that in those modern type um, 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 frameworks and libraries that we often associate with web-based applications like Vue or React, or the new things like Svelte and so on. For me, this is a technology of the past. Do I still have to know about it? Well, for instance, the Craft Academy website, um, that you all visited at one point or another when you before you chose us as your educator, is built with jQuery. And since I do a little bit of maintenance of that from time to time, I need to understand jQuery. But even there, I can tell you that it's not entirely the case. I don't write any new jQuery there. If I need to do anything in JavaScript, I write it in JavaScript, in vanilla JavaScript, rather than using jQuery syntax, because those two can coexist. Now, jQuery is not included. Like, JavaScript is native of your browser. It runs on an engine together, and gives you access to a runtime. And the document object model and so on, right? Now, jQuery needs to be loaded, so you have to either install it on your machine, and reference it in your project, or you can load it over CDN, which is basically that you load it from an external server when you spin up your application. And there are pros and cons with that. Of course, in development, using a CDN is perfectly fine. When you go to production, you really want to rely on your own server and make sure that you can actually load those resources at all times. You prefer to have it installed in your project folder structure. Now, if you look at React, the thing that you guys are dealing with at the moment, if you should try to avoid using jQuery altogether. But if you really need to do it, I would say that you have to install it, of course, and you have to reference it. You have to call on this in your components lifecycle. And if you use a more traditional React component class-based one, then you have this component did mount lifecycle event, and you can also use if you use hooks, you can use this use effect hook and reference it from there. basically. But I would say that you can definitely just avoid using it altogether. There's no need for you to do that in React. Just want to say that so there's no misunderstanding here, right? And some students are and some junior devs are like, oh, I want to create an animated sort of a menu or something, and there are plenty of plugins and stuff out there still, of course, and so they are tempted to use that for something. But I would actually advise against that moving forward. There we go. Right, let's have a look at some examples. Now, what do you often do with JavaScript? Some basic usage of JavaScript. Well, you usually want to find a DOM element, a node, and modify it somehow. That's a very basic use case for JavaScript. So let's say that we have, if you look at my slide, let's say that we have a list item, and that list item contains some text. And in this case, we gave this list item a class that is just called simple li, but we also gave it an ID, list item 1. Now we all know that in a HTML document you can only have one node with a specific ID. Those IDs needs to be unique, whereas classes can be assigned to many to more than one node, right? We know that. Okay, so in JavaScript, in vanilla JavaScript, if you want to get hold of that node, you can just say, you can reference the document, which is the document object model, and you invoke a method called getElementsByClassName, and you just pass in that particular class name. Or you can use the getElementById function, and you just pass in the ID that you assign to this particular node. And in jQuery, you can do the same thing, but slightly different. Now, the jQuery syntax is always prefixed with a $sign, and then that is an alias for jQuery, and then you pass in an argument. And in this case, we pass in the class name, and in the second example, we pass in the ID, but we prefix that with a dot for a class name and this hash sign for IDs. That is the way we reference that. And if you think about it, I don't know how much CSS you are familiar with, but that is the exact same way you reference classes and IDs in CSS. So there's a little bit of like recognition. It's easier to understand for a lot of folks. That's one upside with this. And the other one is, of course, the obvious. It's less code to write. Now, if you look at the JavaScript examples and the jQuery examples, you can clearly see that the jQuery is more condensed, right? It's shorter, which is exactly what the creators of this library was aiming at. So that is one very simple example of comparing JavaScript to jQuery. Now, if we take a look at some other things that you can potentially want to do with a node. Let's say that in these examples we already have the node, and it's stored in a variable called EL, stands for element, right? Okay, so now you can reference that element by in jQuery you just say $sign and EL in parentheses. That will display that particular node. And then you can call different functions on it, right? So let's say you want to toggle the display of or visibility of a specific element. You have a div, let's say, or a list item or what have you, and you want to show it sometimes, and sometimes you want to hide it, right? So in jQuery, they have these nifty functions called hide and show that you can call on an element. Pretty straightforward, easy to understand, verbose, almost like natural English. Straightforward, can't be misunderstood unless you're really stupid. But now in JavaScript you can do the same thing, but you have to take another route, right? There is no specific function for this, but you have to tap into the style property of the element and modify the display property. And if you want to hide it, you have to say none on that display property. And if you want to show this, you just have to pass in as an empty string, which is not very intuitive. If you compare this to the JavaScript, to the jQuery variant, the jQuery variant is easier to understand. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Good stuff. So you can do the same thing in JavaScript, but it's different, right? You have to take a longer route, probably. Another thing that could be interesting to know about, just to exemplify things, sometimes you want to modify an element and add a class, a CSS class to that one, just to modify its behavior somehow. Perhaps, if somebody clicks a button, you want your list item to be displayed in red, for instance, right? So you can have that behavior wrapped in a CSS class, and so you want to add that class name to your element. So in jQuery, there is this, again, nifty function called add class, and you just pass in the class name. It should probably be in a string, and then boom, it's all there, right? Now, if you want to do the same thing in JavaScript, you should, in principle, check if there is a class list already defined, and then you can add something to that class list, or you just give it a class name if this element doesn't really have any classes on it to start with. So slightly more verbose, you need to add a conditional and so on. But this is just an example, because there are actually other ways to do that in JavaScript as well. So you are faced with more options, but what they all have in common is that they are slightly they involve slightly more code, right? JavaScript is, again, in this example, more easy, or easier to understand, what one could say. What else do we have here? Right. So let's say that you have a div, and for some reason, once you've fetched some data, let's say from an external resource, you want to add some sort of content to your div, right? So you could use jQuery to append things, to append them before your element or after your element or inside and so on, right? There are functions to do all of these things. You can do all of these things in JavaScript, in vanilla native JavaScript as well, but they have different names and are slightly more verbose, slightly longer, and so on, involve more code. But you can definitely do the same thing in JavaScript. If you want to remove some content, and we've all been there, you take the element and you just set the inner HTML to an empty string in JavaScript, whereas in jQuery you have an empty function that you can invoke on that element, and so on. Now, another thing that is often done by us when we code is to listen for events, of course, right? So one event that is often present and important for us to listen to is whether the page has been fully loaded or not. Why do we want to do this? Well, if you want to interact with any DOM elements, any nodes, you need to know that those elements are actually present, right? If you start to execute your JavaScript before your page is fully loaded, your JavaScript might contain references to nodes or DOM objects that are not there yet, right? They haven't been created by the browser, and that will render errors for you. I will show you that in a few code examples. So you want to know whether the page is loaded or not before you actually start to execute some JavaScript. Now, in in JavaScript, there are again multiple ways to do that, but the one that is one of my favorites, at least, and often used, is this document add event listener, and then we listen for an event called DOM content loaded, and then as a second argument after the initial parentheses, initial event name, we just add a callback, right? You just add, the code that is supposed to be executed. So that's why I added this comment, your code. Now in jQuery, you do a similar thing. Now in this case, we use vanilla JavaScript as a callback, but you can use an arrow function there as well. But you just reference the document object and then the ready function, dot ready, and whatever is inside of that will be executed, like the function, the callback that is inside of this these parentheses as an argument will be executed. So you probably often, you probably seen this or will see this if you work with anything that involves jQuery. This is a very common thing to do. Right. And that's pretty much what I had. Now, before I go over to some code examples, I got to tell you that the mistake that I did, which is something that I try to prevent. I want to prevent you from doing, is that back in the days, back in 2011 to 2012, when I started to work with web application development more professionally, I learned jQuery first before I even learned JavaScript. Back then, jQuery was really popular. There was a ton of documentation about various techniques you could do and things you could achieve with jQuery, and it felt as a very safe place to go because it was easy to understand, easy to follow, and so on. Right now, for me back then, JavaScript was a bit Greek. It wasn't as powerful as it is today, and it wasn't as widely used, and it felt just weird, to be honest. jQuery felt more you know like a better programming language. For a long time I actually thought that this was a programming language before I understood that it wasn't. But it took me a while then to go into JavaScript. And when we teach you web development, we focus on JavaScript as much as possible today. And we just mentioned this jQuery in our curriculum so that you understand that it exists. For a long time, we actually had exercises and challenges involving jQuery at Craft Academy, but we totally removed that from the curriculum right now. So we won't teach you this. We won't support you on, if you want to use jQuery in your Craft Academy project, we will actually advise against that and probably give you a hard time in code reviews and so on. So please don't use jQuery. But we want you to know about this, and you might want to consider whether this is relevant for you. I'm missing. Yes, right there it is. I thought I was missing a slide. Now, as a new developer, do I have to learn jQuery in 2021? It says 20, but we haven't updated it yet. Or is it enough if I learn vanilla JavaScript? Is one question. Should I focus on JavaScript first and learn frameworks as my first step? Will I ever have to work with jQuery? Can I do all the cool animations that I see on the various tutorials without jQuery? And can I use some of the popular CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or Foundation and so on without jQuery? And let me just answer these questions first. And if you have any comments, feel free, of course, to speak up or comment in chat. Now, the answer to the first one is no. In my opinion, you do not have to learn jQuery. If you are faced with the situation that I mentioned before, that you will be thrown into a project where you have to use jQuery in your first job or whatever, if you know JavaScript well enough, you will pick up jQuery in a week or even shorter amount of time. You will learn that in just a few days. Okay, it is simple. So 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 my so the for that reason alone, I would say don't worry about this at all. Okay, just know that it exists, know how to spot this, know that a lot of the answers on Stack Overflow, even though the jQuery is not that super popular, when you ask something about JavaScript, you might get an answer that involves jQuery syntax, and you have to be on a lookout for that. Okay, but the answer to the first question is definitely no. You do not have to learn this. The second question is a bit out of scope, I would say, now that I look at it. Should I focus on JavaScript first or learn frameworks as my first step? Well, always learn the fundamentals. JavaScript uh, is more important than anything else if you want to work on the front end. Okay. Yes, you need to learn React, and you can spend time learning Vue or whatever. But I would say that you need to focus and sharp on JavaScript and sharpen your JavaScript skills. That is the key to everything that relates to the front end and also the backend. Okay, we've spoke about this at some point, and JavaScript is eating the world. You can use JavaScript on the server side using Node.js, of course, and build this kind of applications. That's important. You can also use JavaScript on building for the mobile. You can build um, for Internet of Things devices. Uh, I have, for instance, CarPlay in my car. You can build CarPlay applications using JavaScript, and so on. React Native, for instance, and so on. So definitely focus on JavaScript. And if you're not sure about anything, then just focus on getting the fundamentals right and learning about all of this. Really, really, really important. Uh, the third question, will I ever have to work with jQuery? We kind of already answered that. The, the answer to this is probably yes, or unfortunately yes. Uh, it depends, of course, what sort of a job you like to get and what you enjoy. You could work with some fantastic people with some really interesting projects, but they are legacy. They involve jQuery. Hey, then you have to swallow it and just go with the flow, right? But there are many scenarios here. But as I said, I showed you those statistics. 75% of all legacy code out there involves jQuery. So the answer to this is definitely probably yes. Now the fourth one, can I do all the cool animations that I see on the various tutorials? See, I'm a backend developer. I'm interested in information systems. So I don't give a shit about cool animations, to be honest. Never had, never will. But the answer to this question is definitely yes. There are far better ways to work with engaging and interesting user interfaces than relating back to some spinning logos or animated menus or what have you. Um, but yes, animation is important because it engages the users. I am not good at it myself, but you can definitely do a lot of great stuff and build fantastic user interfaces without jQuery. And the last one, can I use the popular CSS frameworks like Bootstrap or Foundation? So I don't know if Bootstrap is still relevant or and so Bootstrap is a CSS framework that originates from Twitter, I think. It was very, very popular back in the days. Now it relied heavily on jQuery back in the days. I'm not sure whether it still does or not. I think that in this latest release of Bootstrap, and I'm on thin ice here, but I think Bootstrap is in release 5. I can check that. Yeah, I think it's in 5. Um, I think that they moved away from jQuery as well. I don't think they use it, but I'm not really sure. Haven't used that framework in 3-4 years, so I'm not really sure. Um, if they haven't moved away from jQuery, then you can't use it. But there are, nowadays so many other alternatives to these CSS frameworks. And for those of you who doesn't understand what the CSS framework is basically you not having to reinvent the fucking wheel, right? So these are just libraries of user elements that some, you know, smarter people than you and I combined probably thought about and then defined. And you can tap into that, leverage on that, and just reuse those settings, those elements, and get a nice user interface without you know, sweating too much. I think that is the simplest explanation of what a CSS framework is that I can that I can give you. Right. Questions on all of this, people? Or should I take a snooze and dive into some code? Snooze?
Take your snooze.
Yes. Are you encouraging me to nicotine use? Is that what you're saying? Who said that, by the way?
I
Oh,
snooze
that's
too.
Chris. Oh, yeah, Christer, you and I. That's
Yeah.
us. Yeah. But you're more hardcore than I am, right? What do you snooze? What brand is it?
Nox right now.
Okay, all right. I thought
Cheap one.
you northern people were born in with a snooze in your mouth.
Most of them.
Am I generalizing
Not
now?
me.
Am I being
Most of them,
xenophobic?
but not me.
Oh, you're the exception to the rule. That's great.
Grovlös snus.
Snooze, yes, snooze. Well, robotic doesn't know what snooze is, so we have to tell him. Could somebody post a link to a Wikipedia uh, um, article in chat on stream? That would be great. Anyway, let's see if we can code a little bit. Let's see if we can code a little bit. Let's move this out of the way. And let's bring up our terminal. Oh shit, I had some stuff running on my terminal. Right. We probably need to kill all node. Right. So here's my terminal, and I'm just gonna go here, cd craft academy, new computer. Right. Okay. Do we have demos? No? Okay. Wow. It's a really new computer. Right. And now I will just create a JSJQ demo. Right. Okay, so I want to create a file, and I'm going to call it index.html, and that's enough for us, right? And then just open this up in my code editor. There we are. Okay, pretty straightforward. Let's open up this baby and see what we can do. It's not nap time robotic, unfortunately. It's a nicotine product. Anyway, we have index.html. We're just going to create a basic HTML5 document structure, and that's about it. Now, in my body tag, I can now create a script tag, and I can do something like document, you know, add event listener, and the event listener we want to listen for is DOM content loaded, and we will add a callback here, and I'm going to use an arrow function, and here we will execute some code, and I have spaces 4, and I hate that, so I'm going to just change this to spaces 2. There we go. Right. I don't like 4 spaces. People can kill each other for tabs versus spaces, and the amount, I don't know if you've seen that Silicon Valley episode where the main character actually breaks up with a girl over this topic. If you haven't seen that, I will definitely send you a YouTube clip from that, or commission Emma to find that clip for us. Well, we'll see if we can get that. Anyway, 2 spaces. I'm kidding. Well, actually, I'm not kidding. Right. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to let's say that we want to say const new node equals const Thomas. There we go. Constant new node equals document create element. Where is my create element? There it is. Create element, and we want to create a div. Let's say we want to create a div. Okay, and then we just want to say new node inner HTML, or yeah, inner text perhaps, not inner, equals hello world. Hello world, and we want to add this to our document somehow, right? We have a new node, so now I can say document dot body perhaps, and then append child, and the child I want to append is the new div, so we will say new node. That's pretty straightforward, right? We create the damn thing and we add that. Okay, so let's see if we can run this thing. Yeah, well I can do it from here. So open index, and this is opened here. Whoa, there we go. Right. So we have hello world. And again, if we now set a debugger here and reload this page, we will halt the execution, and I can step forward. We can see now that, not sure if you can see that. Let's see if we can make this smaller. Right, so we are on line 16 here, and now we've created a node. The node has been actually created. We can't see it, but it's there. And how do I know it's there? Where I can hover over this new node thing, and we can see that there is something there. There's a div. I can step forward again. I can set the inner text to hello world. So new node inner text is now actually set to this string. And the last thing on line 18 is to add it to the document. So when I step forward to that, we can see that the words hello world appeared on the screen. Okay, so that wasn't too sexy, now was it? But it at least did what we wanted to do. Now we could do the same thing with jQuery. Now the problem with this is, of course, that I need to include jQuery into my document, and we wanted to add this. I can actually just cheat a little bit and add this, paste this in. We need to add this inside of our head thing, or not. Actually, we can try both variants here. We're gonna add this to head, right? So now we have that, and now we can write some jQuery code. So we prefix everything with $, and we will say document, and then dot ready, and inside here, as you remember, I can have a callback, and so I can just say I can add an arrow function here, and I can just console log done, or document loaded according to jQuery. Right. Okay, so let's see if that pops up. Let's remove this debugger. So if we go to console, we can see that it pops up in our console, right? And if I copy this and just JavaScript, we'll do this, So I have 2 console logs now, right? And we can see that we can see that both of them are showing. Now, an interesting thing here is that please note that the document, the console log that is in the JavaScript version of the you know, the event that is triggered when the document is loaded comes up first, and the jQuery one comes later. And why is that, anyone? Any ideas?
Maybe because it's loading the library and it takes time.
Exactly. Exactly. So the JavaScript one is evaluated a little bit faster out of, you know, if you look at the performance. Now, performance is not a big issue with jQuery. That's not the problem with that library or, you know, way of writing JavaScript. It's only, I think jQuery is like 14 kilobytes big, so it's really fast to load, and it's really nicely evaluated by your browsers. But nonetheless, JavaScript is evaluated even faster, right? So that's just one takeaway of this. Now, let's see if we can do the same thing that we did in JavaScript, but in jQuery. Now, full transparency, I have no clue how to create new nodes in jQuery. Haven't done that in a long time. So I'm going to resort to the biggest friend of all developers, and that would be Google, right? So we're just going to say jQuery create new element, and that is append, prepend, add elements. That's not that. Creating a div element in jQuery. Okay, so I need to do a parent and append this. Okay, that's a weird way to do that. Right, that's not at all the same thing that I would have wanted to do. Div, oh, so I can do this. Okay, equals. All right, so let's try that. So we're gonna say const new JQ node, right? Just to differentiate, it would be a $, and then div. Is that what I wanted? No. I actually need to pass in this. That's so weird. Right. So let's set a debugger here, and let's reload this. Right. So I want to see what is that. Yeah, it is a div. No, it's really new Jake. Right. Okay. Well, we'll see if that will work later. So then we would say new $. Let's see if we can do $, new node, new JQ, JQ node, and then dot text. Can we say that? Hello world. Hello jQuery. And then not hello. And then as the last thing, then I would say document dot body. Can I do that? And then append new node, new JQ node. Right. Let's see if we get any errors on this. Oh, that worked. Okay. Yay! I can learn new stuff at the age of 50. Not bad. Right. Now, this is perfectly fine, and I'm not gonna dwell too much on jQuery stuff, because again, we are not here to learn about this. I just want to show you that we can actually mix both JavaScript and jQuery code. Now you can clearly see that they can coexist in the same document, right? So that we know for sure. But what if I would not use this method to create a new node, but rather use a JavaScript method, way to do this, which basically is document create element, and then just call it a div, right? So now we're mixing vanilla JavaScript and jQuery. So we create this using vanilla JavaScript, but then we modify it using jQuery. Do you see what I'm trying to do here? Okay. Now, any bets? Will this work? Will this not work? Should we do a poll?
It will work.
We have one go.
I think it works.
Yeah. Does the chat have any thoughts on this? Will this mixing of vanilla JavaScript and jQuery actually work for us? No opinions. That's all good. Let's see. Why am I not able to format my code? Fuck that then. Okay. Let's see. It did work. That's not a problem for us. Okay. So if we take a look at some code, right, so we can go to see a website. Do we have it here, or is it on the other one? No, it's not here. Right, there it is. Right. Now let's make this a little bigger, and we go to, let's see, source, JavaScript. Right, so we have, let's see if we look at all JavaScript here. Right, so as you can see here, we mix and match. So this is a JavaScript function, right? The document ready stuff that we are doing, right? And in here we're executing some code. So this is we're calling this ready function using JavaScript, but here we're using we are mixing actually regular JavaScript with jQuery. So it's a fucking mess. Trust me. I maintain this project, and it's not easy. So that's an example of how you can mix and match those things, right? Now let's see if we can pull up something more. Here we have something like a fixed scroll, which is basically the top element of our website, that it stays in place. And here we definitely use a lot of jQuery, right? As you can clearly see, there are massive amounts of these dollar signs back and forward, which is also just it's important to add now when you look for code snippets or you evaluate some code snippets on Stack Overflow. If you see the dollar sign somewhere, it is a good indication that this relates to JavaScript. It doesn't have to, but that's at least an indication. If you're not good at this, you can't really spot what is jQuery and what is JavaScript. You can go with that rule of thumb that if it has a dollar sign, it's probably jQuery. Right, and you see we are also mixing. We're mixing a lot of things. We're mixing the original function keyword instead of arrow functions and stuff like that. And I think somebody asked Emma the other day, why do we even bother with having var and let const, right? In JavaScript at some point. Now, if var would be deprecated, 70% or 80% or 90% of the websites on the internet would just stop working, right? So that's simply not possible. It's legacy, and it needs to be backward compatible. So and the same thing with jQuery. You know, not many people are developing new stuff with jQuery, but they are. You can't just remove this library because then the internet will just break down probably. Right. I'm really just scratching the surface here. So don't think that we can do all of this stuff. And as I said, there's no relevance for you to learn all of these things, but there is a lot of legacy code out there, and you will be using that. I think that's pretty much what I had for you people. Do we have any questions, any thoughts? David, you worked a lot with WordPress before. I know you and I discussed this at some point.
Yep.
I think that for some reason, if anywhere, jQuery still thrives in that ecosystem. Am I wrong?
I think there is some parts. Yeah, I think it works with jQuery totally. If you many libraries, this, how we call it, frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they work with jQuery, almost all of them right now.
Yeah.
And PHP.
I remember that when I was, dabbling a little bit with WordPress back in the days before I just gave it up. There was a lot of plugins and and add-ons that relied on jQuery heavily.
Yeah, I think almost all of them right now is.
Right.
I mean,
right.
yeah, it's not that advanced, but there is.
Yeah. So if you ever draw the short straw and end up working with WordPress, then you're definitely going to work with jQuery one way or another. Unfortunately,
because it's not that fun. So.
It is. It's not.
No.
And performance-wise, it's the shittiest thing ever.
Yeah, it is.
Right. Kim, any thoughts on this? Have you stumbled upon jQuery at some point?
Yeah, I think I stumbled upon it sometime, like some animation for some stuff like slide over on some cards. Yeah, card class. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some animations only I like stumbled on before. There's nothing else really.
Cool. Again, focus on JavaScript. Luke, I'm not going to ask everyone, but have you stumbled upon jQuery at some point? Have you used it?
No, I've never used it, but I've seen it come up when searching for sort of JavaScript sort of questions on Stack Overflow, and they've mentioned jQuery, and I've gone, "What's that?"
And so now you know. At least.
Now I know.
Well, that's an hour well spent, so you don't have to wonder about that then. Seva, last out. Your thoughts?
No, I never seen it. I didn't know that what it is, why it exists, and everything. But now it's like it's clear. Yeah, it's a simple library. Okay, so I won't be like surprised if I see it somewhere.
Cool. Lucas, did I miss anything? Emma, did I miss anything in this talk?
No, I think,
Go ahead, Lucas.
It's just about like you'll see it from time to time, I guess, and as you said, Stack Overflows, and it's just about gracefully going back and searching again, basically. I'd say. Yeah, Emma.
No, I don't think you missed anything. I'm gonna share that YouTube clip because it's really funny. But it's actually about like if you make indentation using that you hit space 2 times, or if you do 1 tab. But it is really, really funny. But it's even funnier if I really recommend to watch like all of Silicon Valley because it's a really, really funny series, and especially when I don't think I wouldn't have enjoyed it before, like joining the boot camp, because then you actually understand a lot of the things that they're talking about. They also do talk a lot about what you guys are going to experience when we start talking about agile and things like that. They have a backlog, and it's a very funny series. And this clip is very funny as well, but I think it's even funnier when you know how screwed or like messed up these guys are.
Yeah, yeah. And so I don't know if my sound comes across to the meet, but I think we should all, if it does, we should all take a moment and watch this. It's 2 minutes and 50 seconds, so I think we can endure that, and hopefully we will never end up in situations like this ourselves. Let me know if you can't hear this, then we will stop this. But here we have the main character of this show, with his relatively new girlfriend, right? I don't think they've been dating for a long. I think also it's his first girlfriend, at least in the show.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
So he's
And also it's quite of a big thing because she actually doesn't look, like she has been hit by a car. So that's also a big thing for
Right.
like
Yeah.
in the series.
Yeah, the side story is that she is a little bit out of his league, but yet there they are, right? And this is how he handles that thing. And again, if you can't hear it, just let me know, then I stop it.
I think if you unplug your headphones, then it will come across.
No,
Yeah,
I mean,
good. Great.
you don't hear it?
Nope.
No, then it's not relevant. Then I can't do that. I don't have any headphones on my
All right.
on this laptop, so no, that won't fly. I will share that link in chat, just for.
I just did, I think.
I know. I was thinking about the Twitch fellows.
Oh, right.
So here it is. Do watch it. It's really good. I can just fast forward that to the end of this.
When he falls.
Let's say that this is how it ends. Let's see. I think we don't need sound for this.
Oh my god. What happened?
I just tried to.
Right. So it's a bit of a disaster for the guy, right? Let's say it doesn't end well for the fellow. As Emma, I truly recommend you guys to give this one a shot. It's a really good show. It does it for us at this point. I see you this afternoon, where we will be talking about agile methodologies and an approach to coding, basically. And for those of you who are following this on Twitch, I just want to send you over to another streamer that I appreciate a lot, and she is studying blockchain technologies at this point, and hopefully you will get something out of following her as well. But thank you very much, people. I appreciate that, and remember, focus on the fundamentals. Don't worry about tabs versus spaces. Learn as much JavaScript as possible. That's the key to success. All right. Thank you very much. See you guys later.
Cool.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Bye.
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 Reels.
I go down the stairs 8 steps at a time. I'm okay though.
ska gå med Vad sa du? Ja, det är snabbare. Det är snabbare. Yes, det skulle jag nog vilja säga. Det gör det. Det tar mycket längre. Ja. Men man lär sig, alltså, det är så här att när du kodar, oj, strömmar jag fortfarande? Jesus, det var